गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक स्तुत सदस्य श्रीमद ईश्वर श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक स्तुत सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद लकोट किशोरदास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जी गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। आचार्य ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कोई श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोकुल श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी बेंगलोरेश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री मायपुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगा की जय। यमुना मई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवंद की जय। समावित भक्तवृंद की जय। गौर प्रेमानंद हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled ones. All glories to the assembled. All glories to the assembled ones. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Divim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jehmudirayet Ashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishniki. Welcome you all to Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 29, text 7 and 8. First we read text 7. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhakti Yogo Bahuvido Margair Bhamini Bhavyate Swabhava Gunamargena Pumsam Bhavo Vividyate. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhakti Yogo Bahuvido Margair Bhamini Bhavyate Swabhava Gunamargena Pumsam Bhavo Vividyate. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhakti Yogo Bahuvido Margair Bhamini Bhavyate Swabhava Gunamargena Pumsam Bhavo Vividyate. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, replied, O noble lady, there are multifarious paths of devotional service in terms of different qualities of the executor. Purport Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is one because in pure devotional service there is no demand from the devotee to be fulfilled by the Lord. But generally people take to devotional service with a purpose. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, people who are not purified take to devotional service with 4 purposes. A person who is distressed because of material conditions becomes a devotee of the Lord and approaches the Lord for mitigation of his distress. A person in need of money approaches the Lord to ask for some improvement in his monetary conditions. Others who are not in distress or in need of monetary assistance but are seeking knowledge in order to understand the absolute truth also take to devotional service, and they inquire into the nature of the Supreme Lord. This is very nicely described in Bhagavad Gita 7:16. Actually, the path of devotional service is one without a second, but according to the devotee's condition, devotional service appears in multifarious varieties, as will be explained, nicely explained in the following verses. Text number 8. Avisanda sandayayo himsam dhambam matsaryameva sambram vinnadrik bhavam mai kuryat satamasaha. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is a separatist is considered to be in the mode of darkness. Purport Srila Prabhupada ki jai. It has already been stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, that the highest, most glorious religion is the attainment of costless, unmotivated devotional service. In pure devotional service, the only motive should be to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is not actually a motive. That is the pure condition of the living entity. In the conditioned stage, when one engages in devotional service, he should follow the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master in full surrender. The spiritual master is a manifested representation of the Supreme Lord because he receives and presents the instructions of the Lord as they are by disciplic succession. It is described in Bhagavad Gita that the teachings therein should be received by disciplic succession. Otherwise, there is adulteration. To act under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master with a motive to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pure devotional service. But if one has a motive for personal sense gratification, his devotional service is manifested differently. Such a man may be violent, proud, envious, and angry, and his interests are separate from the Lord's. One who approaches the Supreme Lord to render devotional service, who is proud of his personality, envious of others, or vengeful, is in the mode of anger. He thinks that he is the best devotee. Devotional service executed in this way is not pure. It is mixed and is of the lowest grade tamasaha. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura advises that a Vaishnava who is not of good character should be avoided. The Vaishnava is one who has taken the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the ultimate goal of life. But if one is not pure and still has motives, then he is not a Vaishnava of the first order of good character. One may offer his respects to such a Vaishnava because he has accepted the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of life, but one should not keep company with a Vaishnava who is in the mode of ignorance. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Sthapitam Ena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudapadakamala Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sankarjatam Sagana Raghunathanvidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabhadutam Parjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padha Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinapantav Jagatpade Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namoste Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Padamami Haripriya Ancha Kalpatarujyasya Kukvasindu Devacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrunda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Uham Karvati Vachalam Pankam Nante Digiram Yekkapadam Hammante Shri Guru Mandamadam Shri Chaitanya Sharam Hare Krishna. So we see in these two verses how Lord Kapila is answering the questions replied asked for by Mother Devahuti. In the first verse, Lord Kapila is explaining that, oh noble lady, there are multifarious parts of devotional service in terms of different qualities of the executor. That means there are many parts of devotional service. It depends on the quality of the one who is performing this devotional service. We'll go a little bit into the purport of this and then go to the next sloka, because this is the basic. The purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions about what is pure devotional service and what is mixed devotional service. The pure devotional service is explained Srimad Bhagavatam as Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yado Bhakti Adokshaje Ahituke Apratihata Yayatma Suprasiti. The translation of that is that the supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. And such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So this is the occupation, that is the supreme dharma or the occupation for any living being, particularly the all human species of life, is by which one can attain loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord. And that such a devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted also to completely satisfy the self. So only pure devotional service can satisfy the self, and that should be unmotivated and uninterrupted. That means there are two important things. That is, one is devotional service must be unmotivated, which is what is mentioned in the purport also. That means one must not have any material motivation in the process of trying to perform devotional service. And the other is uninterrupted. Devotional service is not something like 5-day week, 6-day week, 4-day week, or 7-day week. No, it is uninterrupted. It is 24/7/365, and it is eternal. We'll come to that point also. So devotional service cannot be stopped for our personal interest. We'll come to the point of what is exactly devotional service. Devotional service is something that is done for the satisfaction of the Lord, not for our personal satisfaction. And the next verse, Srila Prabhupada mentions about how devotional service is performed by a person in the mode of ignorance. And then thereafter, the further details go on. So devotional service is something that is unmotivated and uninterrupted. Other than that, anything is not really devotional service because it is mixed. So that is why the purport is mentioned that pure devotional service is one, only one, because there is no demand from the devotee to be fulfilled by the Lord. But generally, what happens is that people have, Lord also says in Bhagavad Gita uh, that there are four types of people who take up the process of devotional service. That is Chaturvida Bhajante Mam, Janaha, Sukrtino, Jana. So who are the four type of people? That is also mentioned in the purport. They are pious men, basically, who begin the devotional service due to four reasons. One is either they are distressed, or they desire wealth, or they are inquisitive, or who are searching after the knowledge of the absolute. So let's take one by one. One class of men are either they have got into so much of distress. Distress is something very, very common in this material world. One cannot come out of it. It is a natural phenomenon in this material world. It's a material world is created with a duality like happiness and distress. So when happiness is there, distress will always be there. It is not that one will always be happy in this material world. On the other hand, it is said that absence of distress is what is understood as happiness, but actually there is no happiness in this material world. So such type of people, sometimes they inquire within themselves as to why they are distressed, and then they are guided by the Lord himself, because the Lord is seated as Paramatma in everyone's heart. So when such a person reaches a distressed condition, the Lord guides, okay, to some Pada Pradarshaka Guru or Shiksha Guru. And finally, through them, they take up the course of devotional service. But initially, what happens is that they all have this material desire. They want to come out of the distress. The next class of men are the ones who desire wealth. And they don't have wealth, so they take up the process. And the Lord might give them some material benediction also in the process. But many times what happens is that when one gets some opulence, then he starts forgetting the Lord. This is the second class of men. And the third is inquisitive. They are curious to know who are we, what are we, and then so forth. They take up this process of devotion service. And the last is one who's searching for knowledge of the absolute. Everyone is looking for some knowledge in the material world, creation, who is behind the creation, God, absolute truth, so forth. So these are four different types of classes of men who take up the process of devotional service. So initially, at least, devotional service is not pure. So when they come, it is mixed. Either it is karma mishra bhakti or jnana mishra bhakti or dhyana mishra bhakti. So there are many parts of devotional service. Sometimes it is due to productive activities, because I want the results of the activities I perform, or sometimes it is I want to understand knowledge of the absolute. Sometimes it is also dhyana yoga, or people perform yoga, but the ultimate purpose of yoga is to meditate on the form of the Lord in the heart. So these are all different processes that are there, but all these processes are mixed processes. But pure devotional service is only one, where there is no demand from a devotee that I want this to be fulfilled by the Lord. So we see in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a very nice quote where Narad Muni is explaining what is the quality of a pure devotee. He says the pure devotee is one who, being completely cleansed of all material desires, they are freed from all material contamination. And thus they can always think of the Lord constantly and address him very feelingly. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing himself to be controlled by his devotees, does not leave them for a second, just as the sky overhead never becomes invisible. That means the actual meaning is that when one takes up the process of devotional service, initially one might have a lot of material desires, but as one continues to perform the devotional service, he becomes freed from all the material contamination he has got. Then he realizes that it is only pure devotional service. Ultimately, Lord is the Supreme Father of all the living beings. He knows what is right, what is wrong, what is good and what is bad for every living being. Not for one of us, but each and every living entity. He knows what is good for everyone. So when the process, one takes up the process of devotion service, he also realizes, yes, ultimately everything comes from the Lord, and everything that one has got, whatever material desire that one has got in this material world, there is no end to it, because as soon as one desire is fulfilled, there is a lineup of desires that stand in the queue. So that also one realizes that there is no end to fulfillment of desires in this material world. So then he realizes that, yes, now I must surrender myself unto the Lord and continue the process of devotion service. Then what happens is that as one continues to render devotion service, one becomes cleansed of all the material desires, and they are become free from all the material contamination. That is the time one starts thinking of the Lord constantly and uh, engages 100% in pure devotion service. And that is the stage when the Lord himself becomes controlled by the devotee, and the Lord does not leave the devotee even for a second. This is the sum and substance of the translation of the particular sloka, which Narmani explains. So there is also a comparison of devotion service to other processes that are mentioned, like the different processes also for devotion service, but Bhakti Yoga is the supreme. So here there is a quote in the 10th chapter of 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the sages are praying and they say, when they actually see the Lord, and then at that time they offer prayers, they say that today we have directly seen your feet, the source of the holy Ganges, which washes away the volumes of sin. That means when the sages see the Lord's lotus feet, saw the Lord's lotus feet, they say that they have seen the Lord's lotus feet, which is the source of Ganges river, which washes volumes of sins. So when one takes bath in the Ganges river, so it is said that so much of sins that we have performed in so many lifetimes, they all get purified. But the next line says, perfected yogis can at best meditate upon your feet within their hearts. That means yogis go on meditation. This is the dhyana yoga. They may meditate on the Lord's lotus feet within their heart. This is the best they can do. But those who render wholehearted devotional service vanquish the soul's covering, that is the material mind, and they reach the final destination. So this is the mercy of the Lord to the devotees. That means those who meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord may meditate many, many lifetimes, but those who render wholehearted devotional service unto the Lord, they this covering, that is the material mind, becomes vanquished. Ultimately, what happens is that our mind is covered, the soul is covered by mind, intelligence, and false ego. And this mind carries one to the next body. But one who performs this devotional service fully without any material desires, he becomes free from this subtle covering of the soul, that he becomes free from mind, intelligence, and false ego, and he attains the final destination, that is the supreme abode that he attains. So ultimately, the point is that devotional service must be pure and rendered without any interruption, and should be unmotivated. And the next sloka, there is a mention of how the only motive is to perform to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this respect, Narada Muni instructs King Yudhishthira in Srimad Bhagavatam that sometimes a neophyte devotee offers all paraphernalia for worshipping the Lord. And he actually worships the Lord as a deity, but because he is envious of the authorized devotees of Lord Vishnu, the Lord is never satisfied with the devotional service. So, what is devotional service? Devotional service should be pleasing to the Lord. And pleasing to the Lord means pleasing. How can one understand that he has pleased the Lord by his devotional service? One can understand by pleasing the devotees of the Lord. If the devotees of the Lord are pleased by the devotional service, then the Lord also automatically becomes pleased. So in the second sloka, that is text number 8, there is a mention of how devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is a separatist is considered to be in the mode of darkness. That means devotional service is also performed in 3 different modes. That is devotional service in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, and in the mode of ignorance. And this particular sloka mentions about devotional service that is performed in the mode of ignorance. And who are those people who perform the devotional service in ignorance? That characteristic, their qualities are mentioned here. They are envious of others. That means they are envious of the other devotees of the Lord. They are proud of themselves. They think that they are the best devotee and others are not. And in the process, they also become violent and angry. These are all step-by-steps that follow. When one becomes envious and when one becomes proud of his own self, then at some time one becomes violent also and also angry. And then the next step that happens is that he becomes a separatist. He thinks that he is the only devotee and keeps aloof from all the devotees. But ultimately, one cannot practice devotional service in that mode. It is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. So in this particular sloka which I mentioned, it explains how a devotee might actually worship, even do deity worship. But if he is envious of the other devotees of the Lord never becomes satisfied with such devotional service. So if one is envious of the other devotee, even if one performs devotional service, the Lord does not become satisfied with his devotional service. So it is mentioned that a Vaishnava is one who has taken the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the ultimate goal of life. But if one is not pure and still has motives, then he is not a Vaishnava of the first order or good character. Now, it is also mentioned that one should not keep company with such a Vaishnava. We'll come to that in the last point. Now, devotional service also is performed by devotees in the mode of ignorance, which one of them is envious. Now, one can always become envious. What is envy? Envy is a case where one is not comfortable with other devotees progressing in the devotional service. Many times what happens is that one practices devotional service. Some may surpass much faster. Some may take a much faster path because he is surrendered. Some may be slow because he has got other material desires to go through. In the process, one who is in the mode of ignorance sometimes becomes envious of the other devotees of the Lord. Such an envy is not a good sign in devotional service, and that is in the mode of ignorance, because when one becomes envious, then he also has that pride that I'm a better devotee than the other devotee. That is not the right quality. And this type of a quality can make a person to degrade in this platform of devotional service if he is not firmly fixed in the association of devotees. So some examples are given as to how Kamsa, he was always afraid of Krishna. Shishupal was always envious of Krishna. Shishupal never accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was always envious, and it was finally Krishna who killed him. So envy is one of the causes, which is a big stumbling block in the progress of devotional service. So even according to Sri Rupa Goswami, such the symptoms are not considered to be good in devotional service. Now, Shishupala's case and Kamsa's case are given. They are different from that of the other devotees of the Lord. Now, many times we find that the enemies who are killed by the Lord, they attain the Brahman effulgence or the Brahma Jyoti. Now, they are also devotees of the Lord, but their mood is negative. So somehow the Lord being all merciful, the Lord lets them enter the Brahma Jyoti or the Brahman effulgence, which is the glowing effulgence coming out from the body of the Lord. But they are not admitted into the spiritual world like uh, Goloka Vrindavana. They don't get entry into any of the Vaikuntha planets. The destination of a devotee who performs devotional service without any personal motivation, ultimately he reaches Goloka Vrindavan or other planets like Ayodhya or any of the Vaikuntha planets, depending on the mood with which they render devotional service. Impersonalists generally achieve this Brahma Jyoti or the effulgence of the Lord because they believe that the Lord does not have a form, he does not have qualities, he does not have name. Such personalities, they achieve the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. But those who are killed by the Lord, whose attitude is negative, they come like enemies of the Lord. Still, the Lord, being all merciful, gives them entry into the Brahma Jyoti, impersonal Brahma Jyoti, which is the undifferentiated light of the Absolute. Sometimes, if they are even firmly fixed, they can also be elevated into the personal form of the Lord, and they can progress even from the Brahma Jyoti. Ultimately, the constitutional position of any living entity is to render service. So if they are able to get right association and they render service to the Lord, they also can become worshippers of the personal form of the Lord. And they can be promoted and elevated to the Vaikuntha planets, where they can get bodily features like those of the Lord. So there is a quote in the Brahmanda Purana. It says that those who have achieved liberation from material contamination and those who are demons and are killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead become absorbed in the Brahman concept of life, which is the Brahma Jyoti, and reside in the spiritual sky of the Brahma Jyoti. That spiritual sky is far, far beyond the material sky. Still, it is a part of the spiritual world, but then there is no activity there. So there is a tendency for those who are in the Brahma Jyoti, because due to lack of activity, for them to fall back in this material world. But those who are devotees of Krishna, they are all promoted to the spiritual planets. Why? Because they have developed spontaneous love for the personality of Godhead. So they are allowed to enter into the spiritual planets to enjoy spiritual bliss in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So ultimately, the point is that there is, just as the Lord has got a spiritual body, which is eternity, bliss, and knowledge, similarly, by constitutional position, the jiva or the living entity also has got this Satchidananda feature. That is, one of them is bliss. And this bliss can be realized when one enters any of the spiritual planets, but it is not realized in Brahman Jyoti. There is also a quote in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which says that the Vedas personified, they offer prayer to the Lord. They say that, my dear Lord, yogis meditate upon your localized feature, and thus they achieve the spiritual perfection of being immersed in the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. That means the yogis also, after meditating on the Lord's personal feature, they may achieve the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. But those who treat you as the and persons, they further say that persons who treat you as an enemy achieve the same perfection without meditating. That means one is class of people are the yogis who meditate on the Lord, but they may attain the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. But there are also those who understand the form of the Lord, but they come as enemies of the Lord. All of them achieve the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Whereas the gopis were embraced by your serpentine arms and have less, even though lusty attitude, but they have a better perfection in devotional service. Because even if one has a desire for some material desire, it becomes purified over a period of time, just as sunshine purifies all contamination in this material world. Similarly, the Lord's devotional service is such that even those who have a lusty desire can also get purified of all the material contamination. Example is given, another very nice example about Kubja. She had a lusty desire when that she wanted to enjoy with Krishna. But the moment Krishna touched her head, immediately she became purified of all her lusty desires. But at the same time, if you look at examples like Shishupala and etc., their jealousy could not be taken out. So that's why they become angry at seeing Krishna. Shishupala was angry in an angry mood when he saw Krishna, and that is why he uttered so many insults, by which later he was killed. Now, but devotional service, if one renders, so Kubja is one who actually had a lusty desire, but later she got purified of all her desires. So similarly, when one renders service, he becomes purified of all the material contamination. In the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Sanat Kumaras are instructing Prithu Maharaj, who was also an incarnation of the Lord. They say that the devotees who are always engaged in the service of at the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord can very easily overcome hard-knotted desires for fruitive activities. That means when one renders devotional service to the Lord, even the material desires, which are like hard knot, it's not very easy to open a knot. So material desires are hard-knotted desires, and one can easily overcome these desires by rendering devotional service. Then they say that because this is very difficult, the non-devotees like jnanis and yogis, although trying to stop the waves of sense gratification, cannot do so. So jnanis are the ones who search at the speculative knowledge. They are jnanis. Yogis also try to meditate on the Lord, but they are unable to stop the waves of sense gratification, particularly in Kali Yuga. Irrespective of whatever it is, that one's condition is so disturbed that one cannot focus on meditation, or one cannot understand too much of knowledge also, because mandasa mandamate bhagya. By these symptoms of Kali Yuga, one of the symptoms of the Kali Yuga is that one is dull to understand spiritual knowledge. So therefore, they say that to engage in devotional service to Krishna, that is the only easy and simple means of becoming free from material contamination. So in the purport, it is said that there are three kinds of transcendentalists. So yogis, jnanis, and bhaktas. All of them try to overcome the influence of the senses, which is compared to incessant waves of a river. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, desiring is a living symptom. It is said that one of the symptoms of a soul is that desire. Desire is like a living symptom. So desires are like incessant waves in a river. They never stop, and they constantly flow incessantly, and it's very difficult to stop them. Similarly, the waves of desire for material enjoyment are so strong that they cannot be stopped by any process other than bhakti yoga. That means even if one takes to the process of karma yoga or jnana yoga or dhyana yoga, it is not very easy to give up these material desires, because that is the symptom of this material world, particularly in this Kali Yuga. Not only that, when one becomes free from all these material desires, the Lord becomes very, very pleased. In fact, in the sixth canto, there's a very nice quote which says that, where the Lord says, "Oh, best of the intelligent demigods, although it is true that nothing is difficult for one to obtain when I am pleased with him, a pure devotee whose mind is exclusively fixed upon me does not ask me for anything but the opportunity to engage in devotional service." That means actually the Lord is telling the demigod that pure devotee is one. For any devotee, the Lord says it is not very difficult for anyone to obtain when one practices devotional service. But when one becomes free from such material desire, the Lord becomes very, very pleased with such a person, because his only thing is, his mind is always fixed in Krishna, and he does not ask for anything but for to be engaged in devotional service. That means a devotee is one who does not have any material desires but wants to be always engaged in the process of devotional service. Another very important point that is mentioned in this verse is how devotional service is very, very natural. As we all know, the spirit soul that is there within our body. In fact, the body functions because of the presence of the spirit soul. And this soul also has got, being a part and parcel of the Lord, it has got qualities of the supreme soul. And the process of connection between the minute soul and the super soul is what is called yoga. And the yoga means actually a linking process between the individual soul and the super soul. And that linking process can be done through karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, dhyana yoga, etc. But even all the other processes of yoga also require a tinge of bhakti, without which it cannot be successful. The reason is, even if one performs karma yoga, he works to get some results. And then if he wants to offer the results to the Lord, one should know to whom to offer. So if one tries to offer it to any demigod, that is not karma yoga. But if one wants to offer the results to the Supreme Lord, then it is karma yoga. So he's connecting with the Supreme Lord by offering the results to the Lord. So karma yoga is one process. If you see jnana yoga, which also mentioned these two slokas, that those who are speculative in nature or those who are inquisitive, they want to know who is the absolute truth. So if one starts inquiring about the absolute truth, he comes to understand he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna only. So Jnana Yoga is one by which one tries to understand the knowledge about the Lord. So there also, without understanding who the Lord is, one cannot have perform Jnana Yoga. Similarly, Dhyana Yoga is one where one meditates on the form of the Lord situated in the heart, which is very difficult in this Kali Yuga. It was there practically in Satya Yuga. It is not that it is impossible in this Kali Yuga, but the living conditions are such that one is too much disturbed and you cannot practice it, and the results take many, many births. That is why, but Dhyana Yoga also has to ultimately focus on the personality of Godhead. So little bit of tinge of Bhakti Yoga is required for one to be successful if one takes up the process of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, etc. But if one practices Bhakti Yoga, which is natural constitutional position of any living entity, or that is the soul. So in the 7th canto, that is Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a quote by Prahlad Maharaja, where he says that this human form of life offers one a chance to return home back to Godhead. Therefore, every living entity, especially in the human form of life, must engage in devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord. So anyone who has got this human form of the life must engage in devotional service to the Lord. But then the next line he says, this devotional service is natural because Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, is the most beloved, the master of the soul, and the well-wisher of all other living beings. So the Lord Vishnu is the supreme benefactor or the well-wisher, supreme well-wisher of all the living beings, because he is the supreme father for all the living entities. So when one renders devotional service, it is natural constitutional position of any soul. And this yoga process is nothing but connecting to the super soul. And who is that father who will not be interested in the welfare of his children? So similarly, when one renders devotional service, Lord Krishna becomes very, very pleased by the service rendered. In the process, what happens? The Lord becomes very pleased and one becomes free of all the material contamination. And in the process, one becomes reaches a stage of pure devotional service. There is one important point that is mentioned in the last point of this verse is that how one should be relating to a devotee who is practicing devotional service. in ignorance. Now, even when one practices devotional service, like I mentioned, one can become envious, one can become proud, one can become violent, and one can become angry. Now, material world, there is a lot of competition. Now, what happens is that when one becomes envious in the material world, he might be able to do something. But even the material world, envy is a very, very dangerous thing for progress in one's life. In the spiritual world or the spiritual activities, it is said that one should never become envious. Rather, one should become happy by seeing the other living entities progressing in devotion service. This is a real living symptom of a devotee. We will come to the classification of devotees, how devotees are classified, how they should relate with other devotees. So, devotees in general should never become envious of other devotees who are progressing in the path of devotional service. So, there is a mention as to how one who approaches the Lord to render a devotional service, but he's proud of his personality, envious of others, or vengeful, is in the mode of anger. He thinks that he is the best devotee. Actually, irrespective of how one renders devotional service, one can never become the best devotee. So if the one thinks that, yes, I'm not the best devotee, I'm the lowest of the devotees, that is the perfect understanding of service. One can never become completely perfect. Once again. Yeah. So it is mentioned that devotional service executed in this way is not pure and is of the lowest grade, that is tamasa. Therefore, Sri Vishnu Chakravarti advises that a Vaishnava who is not of good character should be avoided. So in this respect, sometimes when people practice devotional service, they want to achieve some position. That is also a desire. They want to achieve some power. That is also a desire. To perform devotional service to get some power or position, name, fame. In fact, there was a quote in between circulated in the groups of my spiritual master, His Holiness Jayapatak Swami Maharaj. He quoted that desiring to do something for attaining some name and fame is like the stool of a pig. Very powerful quote. That if we perform devotional service to get some name and fame, is like the stool of a pig. So one should not perform devotional service to get some position or power, etc. So in this respect, there are three classes of devotees which are mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto. One is said that Mahabhagavata or first class devotees. Yeah. And the second is Madhyama Bhakta. And the third one is Prakrita Bhaktas. We'll go through each of these. The Prakrita Bhakta or third class devotees are temple worshippers without specific knowledge of the Lord and the Lord's devotees. That means many come to temple for worship of the deities, but they don't have proper knowledge of the Lord or his devotees. These are the third category, are called Kanishtadhikaris. Then the Madhyamadhikaris or the second class devotees are one who knows the Lord as well as his devotees also. But the Mahamagavata are ones, or the first class devotees are one who sees everything in relationship with the Lord, and they see the Lord being present in everyone's relationship. The Lord is there in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. So the Mahabhagavatas are one. They don't make any distinction even between devotees and non-devotees. They see that it is the same Lord present in every living being. So this is one classification. An example is given as to Parikshit Maharaj was such a Mahabhagavata that he was initiated by a personality, another Mahabhagavata like Sukadeva Goswami. He was equally kind to everyone, even to the personality of Kali, what to speak of others. Then there is one more classification that is given in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. There are three different kinds of devotees, namely Kanishtadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, and Uttamadhikari. That is the neophyte, the preacher, and the Mahabhagavata or the highly advanced devotee. And then the definition is given. The highly advanced devotee is one who knows the condition, the conclusion of the Vedas in full knowledge. Thus he becomes a devotee. Not only that he is convinced himself, but he is convinced, he can convince others on the strength of Vedic science. That means Uttama Adhikari is one who not only knows the conclusion of all the Vedic scripture, but he can at the same time convince the others of the Vedic knowledge. And he can also see other living entities as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord without discrimination. The next one, that is the Madhyamadhikaris, they are preachers. They are also well versed in the Shastras and can convince others, but they discriminate between the favorable and unfavorable. In other words, the Madhyamadhikaris does not care for the demoniac living entity. So the Madhyamadhikaris, they differentiate between the devotees and the non-devotees, whereas the Uttamadhikaris, they don't differentiate between the devotees and non-devotees. And the neophyte, that is the Kanishtadhikaris, are one. They don't know much about the Shastras, but have some faith in the personality of Godhead. So these are various classifications of devotees, that is Kanishtadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, and Uttamadhikari. So there is in the concluding point, it is mentioned here that one may offer a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava is one who has taken the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the ultimate goal of life. But if one is not pure and still has motives, then he is not a Vaishnava of the first order of good character. What do we do in such cases? One may offer his respects to such a Vaishnava because he has accepted the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of life. But one should not keep company with a Vaishnava who is in a mode of ignorance. That means this particular sloka explains about Vaishnavas who practice devotional service, who in the mode of ignorance. So one should respect such a personality because he has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because he is in the mode of ignorance, one should not associate with such Vaishnavas. So in the fourth canto, before I conclude, I would like to mention one point that is mentioned there. It says every man should act like this. When he meets a person more qualified than himself, he should be very pleased. So that means when one sees a devotee who is more qualified than oneself, one should become very pleased. He should be happy. Yes, I have met a better devotee than myself. When he meets someone less qualified, he should be compassionate to him. That means when we see that there is a devotee who is less qualified than himself, then he should be compassionate to such a person. And when he meets someone equal to himself, he should make friendship with him. That means when we meet a senior devotee, we should consider that as more qualified than himself, and he should become very happy. When he meets a devotee equal to himself, he should make friendship with such a person. And when he meets a person who is lower than him, he sees is less qualified, he should be very compassionate to him. In this way, it is said that one is never affected by the threefold miseries of this material world. In this way, one relates to all the three classes of devotees, Uttamadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, and Kanishtadhikari. One will never be afflicted by the threefold miseries in this material world. Otherwise, one can become envious, one can become proud, one can be angry, one can become even violent, which we see in many cases have happened, even in the process of practice of devotional service. But devotional service is one that is pure, without any expectation from the Supreme Godhead, without any expectation. It is uninterrupted. At the same time, it should be unmotivated. But four classes of people take up to the process of devotional service. Even they get purified as they render devotional service constantly. With this, I conclude the class for the day. If anyone has got any questions or any comments, I can take it up for the next few minutes. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yes, any questions, any comments?
One question, Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu, yes. Can you speak a little louder? Yes, I don't know why.
Is it a little better now?
No, still it is low. From my side, it is full.
Okay. Is it better, Prabhu, now?
No, I don't know where is the problem, but I can see that my volume is. Was my class heard clearly?
Yes, Prabhu, it was.
But I'm not able to hear your voice loudly. It's little very low, actually.
Okay. I could hear you very well. The class was very well heard, Prabhu. There was no problem.
Can you otherwise put a message in the chat? I'm not very good in the tech also. Can you speak a little more louder? Is it possible?
Okay. I'm trying.
1 second, let me try putting it in the. Yeah, tell me, I'll put it in my ears. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so, we were talking about the spiritual enviousness. When we see another devotee progressing, that is called enviousness.
Yes.
What happens to material enviousness? When we see other progressing materially well, is it also something that needs to be avoided?
It is good because if somebody is progressing, it is better to introspect and see where is it that I am lacking and what should I do from the material perspective also. What is the reason that the other person is progressing? And if there is somebody has got a good quality and character, I think in the material world also we should try to. Everyone has got something good and everyone has got something bad. It's good to take what is good in others and try to improvise on our own self, even on a material platform.
Yes, Prabhu. No, but will that also be considered as enviousness?
Yeah, definitely. Because sometimes envy can lead to anger. And anger brings a person into delusion. So many times when we become angry, we lose our intelligence also. So one has to be very, very sense-controlled, self-controlled. So enviousness is a big stumbling block in every way.
Yeah. Okay.
Did I answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Yes.
This is little away from this, but since you're a senior devotee, I thought I'll get a correct answer. Just yesterday, one of our group member mentioned that Vishnu is being born by Lord Shiva. Is it so?
Vishnu is born by Lord Shiva. No, it is not true. Achha? Vishnu does not take birth like us in this material world. Vishnu is not born from Lord Shiva.
I checked in the Google and it says chapter 14 Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has said like that. So
no, what is that reference? If you tell me exactly. Actually, Lord does not take birth like conditioned living entities like us, but the Lord appears and disappears. So in the past time, it looks like Lord takes birth, but actually, just like the sun, we see the sun during the day and the sun disappears in the evening. Similarly, the Lord appears and disappears. Lord does not take birth. But to perform his pastimes, when the Lord comes here, he comes with his eternal associates and he shows as if he's taking birth from the devotees of the Lord. But the Lord actually does not take birth. The Lord does not have death also. The Lord is eternal in nature. And if somebody has quoted, it's a wrong quote. I'm sorry. And
no, I
such
checked
things.
In the Google also.
What does the Google say?
It says in Shiva Purana, he says, Shiva says that he was first in the universe and later Prakriti, Durga Mata. So with him, this Brahma and then Vishnu and also Shiva appeared. So this Shiva is Mahakal, the one who has, that's what I read. Just today morning I read it. I thought of asking.
No, I will answer your question. There are many Upapuranas, like Shiva Purana, this Purana. There are so many Upapuranas, n number of them. Each and every Upapurana glorifies a person,
a particular demigod or so and so. So the essence of all the Puranas is Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the conclusion of all the Vedic literatures, which is also mentioned. So if you take to the Srimad Bhagavatam, it gives a complete detail. Now, other Upapuranas might glorify, like Shiva Purana might glorify Lord Shiva. But if you try to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, you will understand actually the Lord, how the Lord appears, how the Lord disappears, how the Lord takes birth. Lord does not take birth like conditioned souls like us. And that is why it is always good to hear the Shastras from the devotees of the Lord who have the faith in essence of the Bhagavatam is the essence of all the Vedic scriptures, all the Vedas, all the scriptures, everything, Puranas. Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence and is the conclusion of all the literatures. So one should try to read Srimad Bhagavatam and understand it from devotees of the Lord who will explain the truth as it is. So if you read all the Puranas, you will have contradictory statements and your conclusion will never be complete. You will never come to a complete conclusion, perfect conclusion. So try to read Srimad Bhagavatam, which gives the correct understanding. And in fact, the process of creation is also given. How the creation takes place.
Okay, Prabhuji. Yeah. Can you just tell me which chapter and canto I had to read, Prabhuji, to know about this?
There are 12 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Correct.
But you will not be able to understand if you jump straight away to any canto. You start reading the canto of Srimad Bhagavatam from the first canto itself. Canto 1 onwards, as you progress up to the 12th canto, you will have a proper understanding of the spiritual science as to who is God, who are we, what is the creation, everything you will understand if you go. It's something like if you try to understand X, Y, Z, it is not possible. You go through A, B, C, D. If you go to the 10th standard, you cannot understand straight away. So you go to first standard, second standard, and then you pass the school, then you go to the college. That is the right way of understanding Vedic literatures. So read Srimad Bhagavatam. First read Bhagavad Gita. If you're convinced, once you're convinced on the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, then you progress to Srimad Bhagavatam. If you go to Srimad Bhagavatam without understanding Bhagavad Gita, you may not understand. So that is why it's good to be in the association of devotees, understand Bhagavad Gita as it is, and then go to Srimad Bhagavatam, canto by canto.
Yes. Now I'm reading canto 1.
Okay.
Yes. Canto 1
You
I'm
completed
reading
Bhagavad
with
Gita?
chapter 8.
You
That's
completed
what
Bhagavad
I'm
Gita?
attending classes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm reading it, but lots to understand. Lots of questions come to your mind, lots to understand. But this comment came with someone before I tell them the correct answer. I should know about it.
Yes,
so,
correct. I fully agree with you. But my suggestion is that try to read Bhagavad Gita fully once, at least fully once before you take up Srimad Bhagavatam. Understand Bhagavad
fully
Gita, then
once
go to
means that
Srimad
Bhavartha you are telling?
I'm telling translation, purport, everything. You must not only read, you must try to understand, because even when you read Bhagavad Gita, you'll have a lot of questions in your mind. And when you hear from devotees, your questions will be answered. Simultaneously, if you want, there is nothing wrong, but your understanding will not be complete. So complete Bhagavad Gita at least once. Have all your basic questions answered, then go to Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay, Prabhuji. Okay.
Is it clear, Mataji?
Thank you,
Did I answer your
Prabhuji.
question?
Thank you so
Mataji.
much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I never commented when I heard that. I just kept quiet. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Good to keep quiet.
Dhanyavad.
Sure. You have done the right thing of not commenting on it. Thank you,
Yes, because I'm not
Anybody
sure
else?
it's perfect. That's why.
Oh, thanks, Mataji. Thanks, Mataji. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other comments? If not, can I